You're looking at the extensive antique Nunchaku collection I've been using to make some videos here on the channel, borrowed from my sensei. I had to give them all back, that's why I had them all in my car and was able to line them all up and take this picture. And in this video, we're going to play with an extra large pair of functional Nunchaku. Now, many people question whether nunchucks, I use nunchucks and nunchaku as a name, were ever really a thing, or if they were ever really an effective thing. The answer to both questions is a simple yes when you actually know where to look for historical evidence. But I've covered that in other videos. What I want to stress here is look at that variety. They weren't just a real practical weapon, they were a weapons family. This freeze frame of the video you just saw is not crystal clear, but here is the member of the family we're going to experiment with today, the one in the middle. Look at the one on the left, the asymmetrical one, which I made a separate video on. If it was symmetrical instead of asymmetrical, that would be a typical pair of chucks. The ones on the right are almost as long, but they're nowhere near as thick, so that's how you get a monster like this. I mean, it doesn't even fit on the frame this time. But I like this freeze frame regardless because it really gives you a sense of how big these things are. I mean, it's basically like I'm swinging a baseball bat. And look at the tension in my arms. I mean, these things really develop a ton of momentum as they get going. These are so long you can't even hold them in the downward position without the one stick resting on the ground. That does not normally happen with this weapon type. Far from it. Well, the sticks are so hefty that your blocking applications are going to be enhanced with this pair. It doesn't take me long at all to figure that two-handed swinging is probably the way to go with this thing. And again, they develop so much momentum. It actually reminded me of exercising with kettlebells, one of my favorite pieces of exercise equipment. See this woman here? She's having to lean back considerably. That's what you have to do because it exerts such a pull on you in the opposite direction, in the direction of the swing. Well, I've never wielded a pair of chucks before where I feel that effect, but I did here. Look at my intuitive lean back here in mid-swing. When I say I've never felt this kind of a pull from a pair of nunchaku, I should stress I mean when it's shaped like a standard set, not like the Nunchaku here, which I made a previous video on, and yeah, that thing is such a monster, such a beast, that of course I feel a tremendous pull as well. But it is shaped nothing like two straight sticks. Back to today's pair, this freeze frame is not me getting ready for a swing, preparing for one, it's me recovering from one. I've swung from my right to my left. That's how far I have to kind of wrap around to dissipate the remaining force. My right heel, but not entire foot, is off the ground, proper body mechanics there for the hooking punch-like motion that I'm going through. You need to know what you're doing with these if you want to swing them with authority. You know, you don't want to be somebody who claims to be an expert on this weapon and can pass judgment on it, but then when they swing it, they look like this. And if that's the case, you're in no position, pun intended, to assess this weapon's capabilities. Just another teasing shot at Shad from Shadiversity. Would still love to debate you about this topic because even after making 4 to 5 videos about this weapon, you still, respectfully, misunderstand it on a fundamental level. So anyway, notice me counter-leaning in the opposite direction every time I swing this on one side of my body. It's really remarkable and surprising how heavy this thing... It's not how heavy it is, but how heavy it feels. It's really more like a war flail, and it feels more like training with a weapon of war than with a civilian weapon, which is what chucks normally are. And reminder, I've held innumerable examples of both types of antique weapons. Therefore, this is how I'd use it. As you might know, I hate the performative twirling with chucks anyway. It's largely responsible for their bad reputation, but it especially doesn't make sense with a pair this hefty. Look at that reach. It's just almost ridiculous. And look at the tension in my arms and legs. You're kind of along for the ride and managing the energy with this. It's more like a Kasari Fundu or the weighted end of the Kasari Gama. Or if you want to use Western examples, a swingle or a sandbag flail. If you don't know what either of those things are, then you should read my book. When it comes to the strengths of nunchakus, because of course they have their weaknesses as well, they just have different strengths and weaknesses than a straight stick. Like I always say, they're just the world's original ASP baton. Portability, concealability, just plain convenience. That was a major, if not the major, selling point. Same reason law enforcement agencies the world over transitioned from long straight sticks to telescoping batons. Even though they definitely have weaknesses that a straight billy club or the PR-24, the old school cop bludgeons didn't have. Experimenting with some close quarters blocking and striking applications, as you can see. But back to what I was saying, does a pair this big negate the convenience factor? Like, if it's going to be this big, should you just carry a large fighting stick instead? Yeah, probably. I mean, I think this goes beyond the sweet spot for Nunchaku dimensions. Now, as you saw there, I can hide it and deploy it. Here's another attempt at that. So it can be done, but I don't want to carry around a pair this bulky all day. And I think it was the same thing in the old days. People just wanted to tuck these into their belt and forget about them unless they needed them. This pair has so much reach, I think lunging and surprising your opponent by going low for a foot would be a good tactic. Of course, that involves risk, especially to your head. And so you'd have to watch out for that, but no risk, no reward. Another thing here is this swings with so much inertia that you could just turn all the way around like I did there to keep the momentum going, again, like a Kasari Fundo. The chain is significantly longer than on a normal pair here. Usually it's just about a fist width. So that would make grappling a little bit more challenging. And as a reminder, unlike a lot of others who will talk about whether or not it's any good for grappling, I've done non-compliant grappling against them, and they hurt like hell. But with this pair, you're gaining that big ol' flail functionality while sacrificing some of the utility there. You could definitely still choke somebody out with them. Speaking of big ol' flail functionality, because these are extra long, they'd be extra good for wrapping around your opponent's block and still striking. Historically, the flail's main fighting feature, its main selling point for actual combat, well known in both the West and the East. The wind is whipping up, as you can hear, and that was very welcome because it was like 108 degrees Fahrenheit the day I made this video. That's why I stick to the trees' shadow, especially when I'm facing the sun. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video and found it informative. By the way, can we say that pairs this long and heavy were actually carried and used in the street? Absolutely, I can tell you that for a fact. Pretty sure no one's ever studied the documented fighting history of Nunchaku more than I have, and I have anecdotal evidence from people who saw pairs like these be used, on top of the documented instances. And that is a scary proposition. I would not want to be on the receiving end of this pair here. Look how far back behind me it goes. This is the pair of Nunchaku that's so big it's almost not a set of Nunchaku. And yet it is. Well, anyway, that's about it. Appreciate you watching.